while executing a raid on the Dallas, Georgia property of 57-year-old Vincent Lemark Burrell in November of 2022, authorities found more than 100 pit bulls and other dogs chained in the yard and basement without adequate food or water. The canines were bred and trained for fighting, and they were purposely secured close to one another to build aggression. They were exposed to the elements for days on end with little to no shelter, while the dogs found indoors languished in such thick urine and feces that law enforcement had to use protective gear just to enter the house. Some of the dogs appeared strong and healthy, while others were emaciated. Following a 4-day trial in Paulding County in late January, Burrell was found guilty of 93 counts of dog fighting and 10 counts of animal cruelty. He received consecutive maximum prison terms for each of the 103 counts, amounting to a 475-year sentence. It's believed to be the longest sentence of its kind in U.S. history, with prison records listing a maximum release date in the year 2499. Number 28. Jonathan Hurst. In August of 2016, 85-year-old Patricia Wilson and her son, 64-year-old Robert Wilson, were found dead inside their rural Sycamore, Illinois farmhouse. They had been beaten to death in what seemed like a random attack, and the case quickly became a whodunit. The victims were longtime community members who had lived at the property since 1970. Their home was located near an abandoned railroad route called the Great Western Trail, which now serves as a popular hiking and biking destination. Local residents were left shaken by the killings, which marked the area's first homicides in years. For more than 3 years, investigators worked to identify the culprit as one lead after another turned up dry. An arrest finally came in 2020 after 51-year-old Jonathan Hurst was identified as the killer through a groundbreaking process known as genetic genealogy. The former Chicago bartender was arrested at his home, which was located just a mile from where the Wilsons' abandoned vehicle was found. Hurst was also connected to the crime through DNA evidence and cell phone location data, and had admitted to staying in a hotel near the Great Western Trail during the time frame in which the murders occurred. The case finally went to trial in January, after dragging its heels through the court system for nearly 4 years. Hurst was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of home invasion, resulting in a life sentence plus 30 years without the possibility of parole. He declined to speak during the hearing, and his motive for killing Patricia and Robert Wilson remains a mystery to this day. Number 27. Jaswain Bell and Quintez Mercer. While driving through a residential neighborhood in Dublin, Georgia, on Easter Sunday in 2024, members of the Money Power Loyalty Gang opened fire on a crowd in an attempt to exact revenge against a rival gang member. The bullets hit multiple victims, killing 24-year-old Sacred Brown and 23-year-old Maori Ellington, and leaving 5 others injured. Within days of the shooting, police arrested 3 suspects in connection with the case, following a 12-day trial. In April, 23-year-old Jaswain Martwain Bell and 29-year-old Quintez Dwayne Mercer were each found guilty of dozens of charges, including 2 counts of malice murder, 4 counts of felony murder, 8 counts of aggravated assault, 5 counts of aggravated battery, 2 counts of criminal damage to property, multiple gun charges, and various violations of the Street Gang Terrorism and Prevention Act. They were both sentenced to 2 life terms without parole plus 410 years. The third defendant, Kendall Brazil, is currently awaiting official sentencing but is facing 10 years behind bars as part of a plea deal. During his co-defendant's trial, he testified that Mercer had an ongoing beef with the intended target, Kobe Todd, who survived the shooting. Brazil claimed that he knew of Todd but didn't have any issues with him, and that Mercer had instructed him and Bell to shoot as they drove past. During cross-examination, he admitted that he did not help law enforcement until earlier this year, claiming that he finally made the decision to do so out of a need to tell the truth. Kobe Todd also took the stand, telling the court that he had no problems with Mercer and didn't see who shot at him. Number 26. Anthony Lewis Jr. While performing a welfare check at the request of concerned relatives in July of 2023, police in Rotterdam, New York, found the murdered bodies of 65-year-old Kathy Ayala Guillaume and 73-year-old Robert Guillaume. They had been stabbed to death several days earlier, and the killer had long fled the scene in Robert's car. Suspicion soon fell on Kathy's son, 31-year-old Anthony Lewis Jr., who had been hospitalized in Pennsylvania the previous day after crashing the stolen vehicle. Investigators connected him to the killings through DNA, cell phone location data, license plate tracking, witness accounts and other evidence, including a large cut on his hand. He was still under observation when authorities learned about the double homicide and was charged accordingly for the victims' murders. While testifying in his own defense during his trial in May, Lewis admitted to killing Kathy and Robert, claiming that God had instructed him to do so. After deliberating for just 30 minutes, the jury found him guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder, unauthorized use of a motor vehicle, and grand larceny. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the killings, plus 7 to 5 years for the other charges. Number 25. Alias Reed. At around 9:30 a.m. on February 20th, 2024, a gunman entered a bowling alley in Bloomfield, Nebraska, and killed the owner and another victim. Later identified as 26-year-old Alias Reed, the perpetrator shot 77-year-old Curtis Strom and 49-year-old William Reffitt in the head during a robbery. He then fled the scene but was taken into custody as a person of interest a short while later. While investigating the case, police recovered money that had been stolen from the bowling alley as well as the murder weapon, which Reed had discarded in a ditch outside of town with help from his girlfriend, 27-year-old Kaylin Sweezy. During questioning, Reed reportedly admitted to entering the bowling alley with the specific intent to kill the victims. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder and other related crimes, while Sweezy faced charges of evidence tampering and accessory after the fact. In late June of 2025, Sweezy took a plea deal in exchange for a 5 to 10-year prison sentence. Just days later, Reed pleaded no contest to the first-degree murder charges in order to avoid the death penalty and received 2 mandatory life terms. Number 24. Torrey Moore. In December of 2022, a man who was later identified as 31-year-old Torrey Moore fatally shot a clerk during an argument at a convenience store in Montgomery County, Maryland. Surveillance footage showed 61-year-old Ayalu Wandimu collapse into the ground as Moore emptied the weapon into his body, at one point leaning over the counter and continuing to shoot after the victim was already down. Moore then went home to his apartment across the street, where police would later discover the decomposing corpse of his girlfriend, 26-year-old Denise Middleton, who had been shot to death nearly 2 months earlier while 8.5 months pregnant. A SWAT team found Middleton's corpse while executing a search warrant at Moore's residence hours after the shooting. Moore reportedly told law enforcement that Middleton died during a fight but denied killing her, and he continued to live alongside her decaying remains after initially fleeing the state for several weeks. He was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of Wandimu, Middleton, and Middleton's unborn son. Just weeks after his arrest, Moore was declared incompetent to stand trial following a court-ordered mental evaluation. His defense attorneys blamed mental illness for his actions, arguing that Moore's decision to live alongside Middleton's body showed that he had lost touch with reality. Prosecutors backed their case with surveillance footage from the suspected day of Middleton's death, which appeared to show Moore grabbing her in the lobby of their apartment building and shoving her toward an elevator. Moore was found guilty as charged of all 3 murders over the span of 2 trials in late 2024, marking the first time a defendant was convicted of killing an unborn person in Montgomery County. He was also convicted of multiple gun charges and violence against a pregnant person. In May of this year, the judge sentenced him to 3 consecutive life terms plus 80 years. Number 23. Terrance Santistevan. While responding to a report of shots fired on a Sunday evening in April of 2022, police in Casa Grande, Arizona found 18-year-old Leslie Cotter and 17-year-old Danielle Murrieta suffering from multiple gunshot wounds in the parking lot of an apartment building. Both victims died from their injuries, and detectives soon uncovered evidence that the teens had been targeted in a revenge killing by an alleged human smuggling ring. The accused culprit, Terrance Xavier Santistevan, was reportedly involved in a migrant smuggling operation with another individual who was dating one of the victims at the time of the shooting. Angry over some money that he believed was owed to him, he sought retribution against his co-conspirator by killing Cotter and Murrieta. Several days after the double homicide, Santistevan was arrested in Pflugerville, Texas, on first-degree murder charges. He admitted to his role in the smuggling operation but denied being responsible for the killings, claiming he was in another city on the day when the homicides occurred. On the 3rd anniversary of the murders in April of 2025, a Pinal County jury found the 21-year-old defendant guilty as charged, resulting in a sentence of 2 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. Number 22. Andre Gordon Jr. In March of 2024, 26-year-old Andre Gordon Jr. carjacked a vehicle in Trenton, New Jersey, and drove to Falls Township, Pennsylvania, where he fatally shot his stepmother, 52-year-old Karen Gordon, and his teenage sister, Kara Gordon. Doorbell camera footage would later show Gordon confronting his father as he forcibly entered the home. After killing the first two victims, he proceeded to the nearby home of his children's mother, 25-year-old Taylor Daniel, and shot her dead in the presence of her kids and several other family members. He also bludgeoned the children's grandmother with a rifle during the attack. Gordon then carjacked a man at gunpoint outside a Dollar General in Morrisville, prompting the authorities to issue a shelter-in-place order as a manhunt got underway. He was captured in New Jersey several hours later after the stolen car was found abandoned in a Trenton neighborhood. In May of 2025, Gordon pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder in order to avoid the death penalty. He was also convicted of burglary, aggravated assault, robbery of a motor vehicle, unlawful restraint, discharging a firearm into an occupied structure, theft by unlawful taking, terroristic threats, simple assault, recklessly endangering another person, and the attempted murder of his father. Gordon was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole for the murders, plus 156.5 to 313 years for the other crimes he committed during the multi-state rampage. Number 21. Jeremy Best. Heartbreak and horror descended on Teton County, Idaho in November of 2023 when 38-year-old Callie Jeanne Randall was found murdered inside her home. She was pregnant at the time of her death and also had an infant son, Zeke, who was conspicuously absent from the scene. Believing that Zeke had been kidnapped, authorities launched a manhunt for Randall's husband, Jeremy Best, who was found sleeping along a roadside a few days later. He was completely unclothed and making bizarre statements. According to deputies, who placed Best into a patrol car while they continued to search the area, they found Zeke deceased nearby, and Best was charged with the murders of Randall, Zeke, and Randall's unborn child. In court, prosecutors presented evidence that the defendant had been pushing for a divorce at the time of the killings. The court also watched a video clip in which Jeremy could be heard telling Randall, "We're not supposed to have kids." Additionally, he had a history of mental health issues and had stopped taking his bipolar medication around 17 months prior to the murders. According to news reports, Jeremy had reportedly gotten frustrated with local medical providers because he didn't feel he was getting the care he needed. The defense blamed mental illness for the accused killer's actions, while prosecutors refuted their arguments. Jeremy pleaded guilty to all 3 murders earlier this year and was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. He admitted to his crimes during the hearing and apologized to Randall's family, who are in the process of pursuing a wrongful death lawsuit. Number 20. Dana Chandler. In the final chapter of a decades-long legal saga that began more than 23 years ago, an Oklahoma woman has been convicted of murdering her ex-husband and his new partner after her 3rd trial. Dana Chandler, who's now in her 60s, was accused of shooting Mike Sisko and his fiancée, Karen Harkness, at the couple's Topeka, Kansas home back in July of 2002. Chandler and Sisko had divorced 4 years earlier, in 1998. Prosecutors would later argue that Chandler killed the victims after losing a child custody dispute against her ex-husband. Chandler was first charged with the murders in 2011 and was convicted the following year, resulting in 2 50-year prison terms. In an unexpected turn of events, her conviction was overturned after an appeals court concluded that the prosecutor had lied to the jury during the trial. The case went to trial for a second time in 2022 and ended in a hung jury, further prolonging the pursuit of justice against the accused killer following a 3rd trial in March of 2025. Chandler was found guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder and was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms. During the sentencing hearing, both of Chandler's children delivered victim impact statements condemning their mother for her actions. But instead of showing remorse, Chandler continued to maintain her innocence in an hours-long diatribe to the court while making it clear that she planned to appeal the case. Number 19. Patrick Crusius. At around 10:40 a.m. on August 3rd of 2019, 21-year-old Patrick Wood Crusius opened fire at a Walmart store in El Paso, Texas, killing 23 people and injuring 22 other victims. Armed with a semi-automatic handgun and a manifesto, he had driven 650 miles overnight from his home in Allen with the specific intent of committing a massacre. Crusius began shooting in the store's parking lot before entering the store and continuing his killing spree. He drove away from the scene but was arrested at a nearby intersection after exiting his car and surrendering to Texas Rangers. During questioning, Crusius told investigators that he had specifically targeted people he believed were Mexicans, inspired by the Christchurch mosque shootings in New Zealand, which had left 51 people dead earlier that year. He stated in his manifesto that he was fighting against what he described as a Hispanic invasion of the United States. Crusius was hit with a multitude of state and federal charges, including capital murder, hate crimes, and gun-related counts. In 2023, he pleaded guilty in federal court to 90 charges, including 22 counts of committing a hate crime resulting in death, 22 counts of using a firearm to commit a murder, 23 counts of hate crime involving an attempt to kill, and 23 weapon charges. He was sentenced to 90 consecutive life terms. The state case against Crusius languished in court until April of 2025, when the defendant pleaded guilty to 23 counts of capital murder. He was sentenced to 23 consecutive life terms and is currently serving his time at a state prison in Palestine, Texas. Number 18. Jeanne Whitefeather and Donald Lantz. In October of 2023, sheriff's deputies in Sissonville, West Virginia, responded to calls from concerned civilians who claimed to have seen their neighbor locking two of his children inside a shed after prying the door open with a crowbar and rescuing the children. Police entered the family's home where they found 3 more children who appeared to be suffering from neglect. The 5 siblings, who are African American, had been adopted 5 years earlier by a white couple, Jeanne K. Whitefeather and Donald Lantz. Following their rescue, they described the unimaginable abuse they had suffered at the hands of their adoptive parents, telling police that they were often reduced to eating nothing more than leftovers and peanut butter sandwiches. They also spoke of harsh punishments, including being locked in a room and forced to sleep on the floor while relieving themselves in a bucket. The children were placed in state care, and Whitefeather and Lantz were charged with over a dozen crimes each, including forced labor, civil rights violations, human trafficking, and child neglect. During their trial in January of 2025, their lawyers argued that the defendants were overwhelmed, denying allegations of forced labor, and that race played a factor in the abuse. Whitefeather was convicted on 19 counts, while Lantz was found guilty of 12 out of 16 counts. They both spoke briefly at their sentencing hearing, maintaining their innocence and refusing to take responsibility for their crimes. The judge sentenced each of the defendants to the maximum, with Whitefeather receiving a prison term of up to 215 years with the possibility of parole after 14 years, while Lantz was ordered to serve up to 160 years behind bars with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Number 17. Deandre Foster. When gunfire rang out inside a Fresno apartment building in April of 2021, residents stepped outside to see what was going on. Inside the hallway, 50-year-old Michelle Johnson came face to face with her goddaughter, 21-year-old Charlotte Etheridge, and the young woman's boyfriend, Deandre Foster. Etheridge was crying, and when Johnson tried to figure out what was happening, Foster fatally shot them both. He fled the scene and was arrested for the murders 2 days later. Foster accused the media of spreading lies about him, but he already had an extensive criminal record, including 2 strikes for robbery under California's 3 strikes law. He also had previous gun-related convictions and was on supervision at the time of the shooting. Additionally, the accused killer had a history of domestic violence incidents, including recent allegations that he had choked and threatened another girlfriend and her family. Just 6 days before the double homicide, he had been arrested for allegedly punching his sister and threatening another family member. In late 2024, Foster pleaded no contest to the murders of Johnson and Etheridge in order to avoid the death penalty. As part of the agreement, he also admitted to 2 gun-related enhancements and 2 prior strike convictions. He was sentenced to up to 200 years in prison, ensuring that he'll remain behind bars for the rest of his days. Number 16. Matthew Muller. Serial kidnapper Matthew Muller is a U.S. Marine veteran and former lawyer from California who started committing home invasions in 2009 amid a mental health decline. During that year alone, he broke into women's homes in Mountain View and Palo Alto, where he forced the victims to drink NyQuil and tried to force himself on them. Muller was still at large in 2015 when he broke into a couple's Vallejo home and kidnapped Denise Huskins while holding her boyfriend, Aaron Quinn, captive He was later found guilty of the crime, which infamously became known as the Gone Girl kidnapping, and was sentenced to 40 years in prison. Determined to hold Muller accountable for more of his crimes, prosecutors charged him for the 2009 home invasions. In January of this year, he pleaded guilty to the crimes in Santa Clara County Court and was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms. The number of crimes Muller committed may never be known. In recent years, he's confessed to kidnappings and assaults dating back to his teenage years. He pleaded guilty to a 1993 kidnapping and assault in June of this year and was sentenced to 11 additional years to be served consecutively to his life sentences. The following month, Muller admitted to a 2015 kidnapping that took place just weeks after the Gone Girl abduction and was sentenced to yet another life term. Number 15. Torrey Lamar Fox. 17-year-old high school senior Brianna Soto was fatally shot just steps away from the front door of her Long Beach, California home while walking home from her job at McDonald's in March of 2024. She was rushed to the hospital where she succumbed to her injuries 3 days later. Soto's killer, 34-year-old Torrey Lamar Fox, had no known connections to the victim, and his motive for the crime remains a mystery to this day. He was still at large the following month when he opened fire on a car carrying 4 minors, who all survived unharmed. 6 months later, Fox was charged with Soto's murder after being connected to the crime through DNA, video, and other evidence. He was also charged with 4 counts of attempted murder for the second shooting. At the time, Fox was already in custody for an unrelated weapons charge and had a lengthy criminal record, including prior convictions for making criminal threats, grand theft, and commercial burglary. In March of 2025, Fox was found guilty of the murder and attempted murder charges, along with 2 counts of being a felon in possession of a weapon. He was sentenced in July to 358 years in prison, effectively amounting to a life term. Number 14. John Pastor-Mendoza. Between 2018 and 2022, 43-year-old John Pastor-Mendoza kidnapped at least 12 women while posing as a ride-share driver in Denver, Colorado. He spent his time lurking outside of clubs and bars while targeting women who seemed intoxicated and who were unlikely to realize that he was not their assigned driver. According to authorities, Pastor-Mendoza assaulted some victims as soon as they entered his car while driving others to another location before assaulting them. He was charged with the kidnappings and related crimes in October of 2022 after being tied to at least 3 of the victims through DNA evidence, but he denied any wrongdoing and took his case to trial. In October of 2024, Pastor-Mendoza was found guilty of 30 charges including robbery, 12 counts of kidnapping, assaulting 2 victims, and attempting to assault 7 others. He continued to maintain his innocence during his sentencing hearing in March, but was sentenced to 290 years to life in prison. State records list the parole eligibility date of May 2118, ensuring that the convicted serial creep won't walk out of the penitentiary alive. Number 13. John Anthony Cole. In October of 2021, police in Fort Smith, Arkansas, responded to a report of a dead body in a car. Upon arriving at the scene, officers found the bullet-riddled body of 35-year-old Jeremiah Hawthorne, who had been shot multiple times. While investigating the case, detectives heard rumors that a man named John Anthony Cole was responsible for the killing. When they finally got a chance to interview him in late 2022, he admitted to killing Hawthorne because he was afraid the victim would tell police about his alleged drug dealing activities. By then, Cole was already facing a separate murder charge in Arizona for killing Antoine Smith, whose remains were found in the trunk of the suspect's car during a traffic stop in 2022. Cole pleaded guilty in that case in 2024 and was sentenced to 31 years in prison. Earlier this year, he pleaded guilty to Hawthorne's murder and 2 counts of attempted capital murder for stabbing 2 deputies while in pre-trial detention, landing himself an additional 200 years behind bars. Number 12. Nicholas Mangelli. 35-year-old Nicholas Jeffrey Mangelli was already serving life without parole for killing a Sacramento man when he murdered 2 fellow inmates in 2019 and 2022. The victim in the first prison killing, 63-year-old Charles Anthony Ross, was attacked from behind and stabbed between 15 and 20 times with a makeshift weapon. The second victim, 59-year-old Wayne Albert Caskey Jr., was killed in a similar fashion. Mangelli killed for the first time in 2012 when he stabbed 26-year-old Iraq war veteran Michael Allen Cole to death during a drug-fueled robbery. In April of 2025, a judge found him guilty of murdering Ross and Caskey Along with assault and weapon possession charges, he was sentenced to 2 additional life terms, further solidifying the already extremely low likelihood that he'll ever see daylight outside prison walls. Number 11. Michael Merryman. 3 Shasta County, California residents were murdered at the hands of Michael Todd Merryman over a week-long period started in late April of 2024. 75-year-old Pamela Castleberry was shot in the back of the head after arriving home in the middle of a home invasion. Merryman disposed of the victim's body, then summoned 41-year-old Cynthia Duran and 48-year-old Luis Sanchez to help him get rid of her SUV. After discovering that law enforcement had already seized the vehicle, he fatally shot Duran and Sanchez as they tried to escape, then lit their bodies on fire. Police arrested Merryman in May of 2024 following a weeks-long manhunt. He admitted to the murders and other crimes, and in early 2025, he pleaded guilty to the killings. The judge sentenced him to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. Number 10. Rangel Vangas. 53-year-old Rangel Vangas already had a murder conviction under his belt for murdering his girlfriend in 1996 and had only been out of prison for less than 4 years when he allegedly struck again in October of 2024. In the more recent case, victims Randy Zink and Tammy Quayle were found beaten to death inside of a boarding house in Springettsbury Township, Pennsylvania. Vangas was arrested at the scene. He admitted to the killings, telling police that he previously had a relationship with Quayle, who befriended Zink after they had a falling out. Vangas believed that Quayle only befriended Zink because the 2 men didn't get along and claimed that the victims had been harassing him. Prosecutors announced their plans to seek the death penalty against Vangas, even though no executions have taken place in Pennsylvania since 1999. He pleaded guilty to both murders in order to avoid capital punishment and was sentenced in February of 2025 to 2 consecutive life terms. Number 9. Dmond Jackson. 31-year-old Dmond Renard Jackson of Augusta, Georgia, was among 30 defendants who were arrested in 2024 for crimes they were accused of committing as members of the Trap Money Gang. He was indicted on 29 charges relating to his crimes, which reportedly took place over a 2-month period starting in April of 2024 and included armed robberies, kidnappings, carjackings, and shootings. According to authorities, Jackson robbed 1 convenience store on 4 separate occasions, while also targeting other businesses, including other gas stations and a Dollar General store. During the robberies, he brandished a gun, jumped over the store's counter, and demanded cash. Jackson was also one of 7 inmates who were accused of participating in a gang-related altercation while in pre-trial detention. In March of 2025, a jury found the defendant guilty of his crimes, resulting in a sentence of 7 consecutive life terms plus 280 years. Number 8. James Frederick Wilson. In October of 2022, authorities in Columbia, Missouri, announced the arrest of a suspect in the 1984 cold case assault and attempted murder of a woman who was abducted at knife point by a stranger. She narrowly survived after having her throat cut and being left for dead in a wooded area. After decades of trying to solve the case, detectives used advanced DNA technology to identify 59-year-old James Frederick Wilson as a suspect. He was arrested at his Mooresville, North Carolina home and extradited to Missouri, where he was found guilty as charged in February of this year. Wilson's defense attorney urged the court for a lenient sentence, arguing that he had lived a completely law-abiding lifestyle since the attack, while citing the defendant's age as a justifying factor for the eventual chance of parole. But the judge took no mercy and sentenced Wilson to the maximum punishment of 2 consecutive life terms, bringing a long-awaited end to a 40-year-old quest for justice. Number 7. Bryce Andrews. While responding to a residential fire in Alton, Illinois, in February of 2021, emergency personnel discovered the murdered bodies of 59-year-old Robert Andrews and his spouse, 67-year-old Leonard Jim Embry. The victims had been stabbed a combined total of 115 times by Robert's adopted son, Bryce V. Andrews, who set fire to the home before fleeing to St. Louis. Bryce had recently moved back in with Robert and Embry at the time of the double homicide. Robert had taken him in as an infant and nursed him back to health after he was born to a drug-addicted mother with the expectation that he would not survive. Following the victims' deaths, Bryce was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder, 2 counts of concealment of a homicidal death, and 1 count each of aggravated arson and motor vehicle offenses. Following a bench trial in February of 2025, Andrews was found guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms for the murders, plus 10 years for aggravated arson and 5 years for concealment of a homicide. Number 6. Joshua Dotson. 25-year-old Joshua Dotson of Memphis, Tennessee was already serving a 102-year sentence for the first-degree murders of his pregnant girlfriend, Jamisha Cobson, and her unborn child, when he confessed to killing 3 additional victims. During the trial for Cobson's murder, he had referred to himself as a serial killer and likened himself to Michael Myers. He also said that he had killed the victim because he was afraid she would tell on him for the other killings. In addition to the murders of Cobson and her unborn child, which took place in June of 2020, Dotson admitted to killing 18-year-old Devion Parker, who was shot dead in a parking lot in November of 2019. Dotson also admitted to the double homicide of Renita Bennett and Reginald Anderson, who were fatally shot in May of 2020. In February of 2025, he pleaded guilty to 3 counts of first-degree murder and 3 counts of reckless endangerment with a deadly weapon. Dotson was sentenced to an additional 159 years, bringing his prison terms to a grand total of 261 years. But prison records state that he's serving a 306-year term, with a listed parole eligibility date of August 2317. Number 5. David Linthicum. In February of 2023, law enforcement in Baltimore County, Maryland, responded to a 911 call from the concerned father of David Linthicum, who was worried about his son's mental state. Responding officers tried to make contact with Linthicum, who was sitting in his bedroom with an AR-15. But instead of engaging in a conversation, he fired 16 shots at the police, striking Officer Barry Jordan twice. Linthicum then fled the scene and remained at large for 3 days, leading the authorities on a multi-county manhunt. During that time, he shot another officer, Jonathan Chai, who remains out of work to this day due to his injuries. He then stole Chai's vehicle and drove into neighboring Harford County, where he was arrested without further incident after an 8-hour standoff. In September of 2024, a jury found Linthicum guilty of 4 counts of attempted first-degree murder and armed carjacking. He was sentenced to 2 life terms plus 30 years. Number 4. Robert Crimo III. The 2022 4th of July holiday took a horrifying turn in Highland Park, Illinois, just after 10 o'clock in the morning, when a gunman opened fire on civilians from the roof of a downtown building with a semi-automatic rifle. 7 people were killed and 4 dozen others were injured at the hands of 21-year-old Robert Crimo III, who fired a total of 83 rounds during the massacre. He fled the scene in a vehicle and was apprehended 8 hours later following an intensive multi-agency manhunt. During questioning, Crimo admitted to being the shooter, telling police that he disguised himself using makeup and women's clothing. He was indicted on 117 felonies, including 21 counts of first-degree murder, 3 counts for each victim, 48 counts of attempted murder, and 48 counts of aggravated battery. As his trial approached in March of 2025, he pleaded guilty to 69 counts, including first-degree murder and the attempted murder charges. Crimo was sentenced to 7 life terms plus 2,400 years, including 50 years for each of the 4 dozen attempted murder counts. Number 3. Cooper Wesley. In early November of 2023, Crawford County deputies responded to 2 shootings in Alma, Arkansas, where they found 57-year-old Terry Brasewell and 47-year-old Donald Lewis dead from gunshot wounds to the back of the head. A witness identified 25-year-old Cooper Wesley as the gunman, and he was arrested 2 days later on suspicion of 2 counts of capital murder. During questioning, he told police that he had handled business that needed to be handled and that he had gone to Walmart on the morning of the shooting to buy clothes for his mission. Wesley reportedly believed that the victims played a role in killing his family, but his family was alive and well when the killings occurred. He would later argue in court that he was intoxicated at the time of his crimes and that he wasn't in his correct state of mind. Wesley was found guilty as charged following a 3-day trial in July of 2025 and was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms. The jury convicted him after deliberating for less than 20 minutes, making it clear that they were convinced by the evidence. Today's topic was requested by Enrique Morris 934. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Kenneth Perry. In July of 1990, 43-year-old Pamela Sumter and her brother, 46-year-old John, were found stabbed at an apartment complex in Stone Mountain, Georgia. Officers arrived to find John dead and Pamela clinging to life in a neighboring apartment. Before succumbing to her injuries, Pamela gave investigators a description of her attacker, who she described as a stranger. The case went unsolved until 2024 when a DNA sample from the crime scene turned up as a match to an unprosecuted assault case in Michigan. In that case, the victim had identified her ex-boyfriend, Kenneth Perry, as a suspect. Earlier this year, Perry was indicted on charges of malice murder, felony murder, aggravated battery, possession of a knife during the commission of a felony, and more. He took the stand in his own defense during his trial in March, but failed to convince the jury of his innocence and was found guilty as charged. The court sentenced him to 3 consecutive life terms plus 10 years. Number 1. Jared Dean Zisman. On a Saturday night in July of 2021, 911 dispatchers in Berrien County, Georgia, received an ominous 911 call from 20-year-old Jared Dean Zisman, who confessed to killing several family members but said the job isn't done. He had attacked 3 household members with a baseball bat, killing his uncle, Mark Pagan, while leaving his mother and brother injured. Zisman's brother survived with non-life-threatening injuries. His mother was airlifted to the hospital in critical condition and permanently lost vision in one eye. Following his arrest, Zisman admitted to planning the attacks ahead of time. He was found guilty as charged in July of 2025 after the jury deliberated for less than 45 minutes and was sentenced to life without parole plus 25 years for his crimes. Thanks for watching. Let us know in the comment section below if you think we missed any specific cases. Maybe we'll feature them in a future episode.